Call to order the meeting of the Senate Commerce and Consumer Protection Committee on January 23rd, 2025, 12:35 p.m. Welcome to the committee. Members and those in attendance, want to just introduce the new organization of the committee. I will go through full staff introductions with our new staff and our new members, but I want to just announce that power sharing in the Commerce Committee has gone very well. I've met with Chair Dames repeatedly, and we've got a plan for how we're going to organize for these weeks that we share power. We are going to meet today and hear the informational hearing that you're aware of. We will plan to meet again a week from today on January 30th and hear Senate File 333, as well as an update from the Office of Cannabis Management. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chair Dames for any comments.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Do appreciate the opportunity to work with you. Appreciate the opportunity to co-chair with you as far as the power agreement, and look forward to working with the rest of the committee here, and hopefully we can get some good things done.
Thank you, Chair. Members, we have a few new staff members I'd like to just make you aware of and introduce. My new legislative assistant, committee legislative assistant, Ellie Thibodeau-Lissick. Moving from research to GOP committee administrator is Linnea Michelson. We have a new fiscal analyst, Krista Boyd. We have three new pages, Jillian Cherney, Mitchell Winter, and Sydney Tiffany, if you want to wave. And we have Council Nolan Huddla joining us for health insurance issues. We have a new vice chair. Our current member, Senator Jordan Rasmussen, is elevated to vice chair position. And we have two new members on the committee that I will have introduce themselves. Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Steve Green, I represent District 2 from just north of Detroit Lakes up to Northwest Angle, and from all of Monoman County over to just about Grand Rapids.
Thank you, Senator Green. And then when Senator Matthews arrives, we will have him introduce himself. Members, the purpose of the meeting today is an overview of the changes at the Commerce Fraud Division. Commerce Fraud Division is 28 employees who are charged with investigating insurance fraud and are under the oversight of this committee. They are funded by fees on the insurance industry, and as part of an executive order, which is contained in your packets from January 5th, Governor Walz has moved those employees over to the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. So they will no longer be in our jurisdiction. And we wanted to make sure the public was aware of the change and had the opportunity to weigh in on it and offer any advice and answer our questions. So with that, I think I will go ahead and call to the table the three testifiers. Welcome to the committee, and if you could start by all three of you please introducing yourself for the record and then proceed.
Sure. I'll start. My name is Grace Arnold, and I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Commerce.
Good afternoon. My name is Drew Evans. I'm the Superintendent at the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension.
And good afternoon, Bob Jacobson, Commissioner of Public Safety.
Proceed.
All right. So I'm going to, the Commissioner and I are going to offer some introductory remarks, and then Superintendent Evans has a PowerPoint to walk through, which I think is in the materials. So Chair Klein, Chair Dames, and members of the Senate Commerce Committee, for the record, my name is Grace Arnold, and I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Commerce. I'm here to provide an overview of the transfer of the Commerce Fraud Bureau to the Department of Public Safety under the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, or the BCA. Before I speak to the transfer, I think it's important to understand that fraud can and does impact all of us. Fraud can look like an innocuous text message that leads your elderly relative to send money to someone that they don't know. It can look like a business illegally trying to avoid workers' compensation insurance premiums. It can look like a fake auto accident where the perpetrator pockets the claim money, or it can look like businesses illegally taking taxpayer money for services that they do not actually perform. The Walz administration is committed to ensuring that there's coordinated and comprehensive response to fraud in the state, and in particular to fraud against the state government. The Commerce Fraud Bureau is a nationally recognized leader in combating insurance fraud, and under Governor Walz's executive order, they will continue to do this excellent work at DPS as they join a unit focused on fraud and financial crimes generally, and specifically fraud against the state government. The Commerce Fraud Bureau is a law enforcement agency comprised of sworn peace officers and civilian staff who combat insurance fraud, tackle financial crimes, and administer the auto theft prevention program. Annual funding for the Fraud Bureau comes from 4 major sources. The first is an insurance fraud assessment on insurers, so it's passed on to policyholders. A legislative appropriation from the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry to conduct investigations concerning workers' compensation fraud, an administrative fee to offset the costs associated with managing the auto theft prevention grant program, and a $1.3 million appropriation from the auto theft prevention grant program. The funding sources and scope of the work for the CFB will not change upon transitioning to the BCA. Insurance fraud is one of the nation's largest crimes, with at least $308.6 billion stolen each year, according to the Coalition Against Insurance Fraud. Insurance fraud occurs when individuals deceive an insurance company, agent, or other person to try to obtain money to which they are not entitled. The CFB routinely undertakes complex investigations that require a high level of expertise, and often that is usually beyond the scope, capacity, or expertise of other law enforcement agencies. As such, the CFB collaborates with local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies to apprehend those responsible for committing these crimes and supports the charges by local, state, and federal attorneys' offices to hold individuals accountable for their actions. In 2023, the CFB fielded 2,942 case referrals, mostly from insurers. CFB criminal investigations resulted in criminal complaints against individuals who were responsible for committing crimes that had a total economic impact on Minnesotans of just over $35 million. The 5 largest areas of suspected fraud reported to the CFB in 2023 were automobile insurance, homeowners insurance, healthcare insurance, workers' comp, and life. As of December 1st, 2024, the CFB has over 170 active investigations, and in December 2024, there were over 200 referrals sent to the CFB for allegations of insurance fraud. The range of investigations and complaints the CFB undertakes are broad and varied. They include investigations around fraudulent health insurance claims, businesses illegally trying to avoid paying workers' compensation premiums, cyber financial crimes, property and casualty insurance schemes, funeral insurance fraud, and more. As fraud schemes become more and more complex and the perpetrators more and more savvy, our tools and techniques for identifying criminal activity have grown and will continue to grow more sophisticated. Pooling resources from the CFB and the BCA to assist in our ability will assist in our ability to use those more sophisticated tools, as well as to share knowledge about how and when fraudulent activities are occurring across industry. The work of the CFB is complex, meaningful, and plays a key role as part of the state's consumer protection and criminal justice systems. I have no doubt that the Commerce Fraud Bureau will continue to deliver for Minnesotans within the BCA as it does today within the Department of Commerce. The work of the CFB is not changing with the transition to the BCA. The Department of Commerce is committed to working with DPS and community partners to ensure that Minnesotans have a recourse if they are victims of fraud. Thank you for your time, and I'll hand it over to Commissioner Jacobson.
Commissioner Jacobson, welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
Thank you. Hello again, Chair Klein, Chair Dames, and members of the Commerce Committee. I am Bob Jacobson, as mentioned, the Commissioner of Public Safety, which includes the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. And I'm here today to talk briefly about the importance of this newly created fraud unit. Governor Walz created this new fraud unit to help protect state dollars. And I must say that I'm honored that the governor chose us as a location of this team to begin work on this process. And I'm also excited to begin serving with this new team. Minnesota, as a state, is committed to helping people, and we're committed to providing services that improve the lives of Minnesotans. Fraud against these public programs is unacceptable, and it's not a victimless crime, and it harms the same people we're trying to help with these services. And I have heard similar concerns from legislators. As Commissioner Arnold said, the Commerce Fraud Bureau has done great work. They have great employees who have unique skills and experiences working on fraud. This new unit will combine those Commerce Fraud Bureau employees with agents and other staff at the BCA who currently work on fraud and white-collar crime into one specialized unit. This new section of over 40 FTEs will be the state's fraud experts. They will not be asked to work homicide or drug cases. They will be asked to investigate fraud. And I look forward to the future of this new team. I know and believe that they will make a positive impact for the state of Minnesota. And so for more detail on this new unit, I will turn it over to the BCA Superintendent, Drew Evans. Thank you.
Superintendent Evans.
Thank you, Chair Klein and Chair Dames and members of the committee. I appreciate your time today, and I will walk through just a slight overview. I know you're very familiar with the work of the Commerce Fraud Bureau, so that portion of this presentation is a little bit shorter. And as the commissioner noted, she went through a few pieces of this outlining their great work of that organization. As you know, and for some that may have not been on this committee, back to 2004, this was established at the Commerce Fraud Bureau within the Department of Commerce, as you can see, to investigate insurance fraud-related offenses. Right now, in a statutory adjustment, 70% of their time is required by statute to work in insurance fraud-related cases, and that's in 2022. There was an expansion of their authority that added that percentage in at that time, and personnel to continue to focus on these critically important crimes that occur across the state of Minnesota, as Commissioner Arnold noted. The current staffing, and there are a couple of vacancies in this process in this slide deck from there. There are 21 agents, 6 analysts. As Commissioner Arnold, or as we've noted here today, there's 27 full-time staff and 1 student worker. Those are the staff that will be contemplated in forming this new unit, along with the agents that are and analysts that are assigned to the BCA team there. It's currently task force relationships with a number of federal agencies in this process. The BCA also has many of the same relationships in one form or another, and those relationships are used to as a force multiplier as we're investigating a variety of different criminal activities, so that it is not always just the state agencies that are doing this work, but we're also utilizing our federal partners' resources, expertise to further large-scale investigations, regardless of what that crime category might be. As Commissioner Arnold noted, there's an overview of the case referrals that have been referred to the Commerce Fraud Bureau over the past 10 years. As you can see, as any referral process will fluctuate, but there's a large number of case referrals that will continue to come over. In particular, just to reiterate throughout this presentation, this work will remain the same. This work will continue. This is critically important work, not only to the stakeholders, to this committee, the legislature, and the governor in this process, to ensure that the work we have and continue to do with these personnel will continue. As I noted before, insurance fraud is about 70% of the work, but there's also a number of different financial crimes, white-collar crime, that this unit has focused on and really been a leader in many ways, working together with our teams that do this work and all of their local partners and federal partners to look at other scams that you've seen here. Elder financial exploitation and fraud, which I think is something that we'll continue to need to take a look at in Minnesota as our population continues to gray in the state of Minnesota. And then they've developed expertise that we have as well at the BCA on crypto scams, as we see cryptocurrencies continue to grow in use across the United States, and have really done a pretty amazing job with some of that work. In 2009, the Commerce Fraud Bureau began managing the auto theft prevention program that I'm sure you're familiar with here, which is funded by a 50-cent surcharge on auto insurance policies. And they're responsible for a statewide strategy to combat auto theft. I'll just note, as I'm sure you're familiar with this work, I've been very impressed as we've been working through this transition process of the scope and how that team has really looked at how to best utilize the funding available in a very strategic way to combat auto theft, as we know has been a very big challenge for some of our communities across Minnesota. And so in fiscal year 24, about $4.5 million in grants were there, and we've been talking about a rollout process for a new grant process moving into this year in partnership together with the Commerce Enforcement and the Department of Public Safety. As part of that auto theft program, they have a very robust audit process on the funding and do a detailed report to the legislature. I'm sure many of you have reviewed it. It's an excellent report that details the work of the teams that are funded out of that fund every year. And then they have a lending library that is equipment and an investment that you've made, $500,000 to purchase equipment that can be best pooled and used across jurisdictions on a case-by-case basis to combat auto theft in particular. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension and an overview. Some of you on the committee are familiar with that, but part of that is because we're in the Commerce Committee today, so we have a full understanding of the work that we do at the BCA and the scope and breadth of the work that's done at the BCA today. We were established in 1927. We won't go year by year on how we evolved, but we've been around as an organization for a long time. Originally as a criminal investigative agency, but we in Minnesota added the Division of Statistics in 1935, which is where all the crime records are. So we're one of the states that have crime statistics going back many years. Our forensic laboratory was added in 1947. And that's much how we're organized today. We have 4 divisions, 3 large divisions in MNJIS, which is Minnesota Justice Information Services. All of the databases and criminal history records, fingerprints, background checks are in that division across the state of Minnesota. Forensic Science Services, your state crime laboratory. We have 1 main laboratory in St. Paul at our headquarters location, a satellite laboratory in Bemidji, and we are hoping to build a 3rd location in Mankato that was part of the governor's bonding rollout today. We have 13 field offices currently across the state of Minnesota where we have agents located. The stars you can see are our field office locations throughout the state of Minnesota, and that map doesn't mean anything for this particular purpose. We color code because the way our agents typically work is they're responsible for counties and the law enforcement partners they assist and criminal justice partners throughout them. That's what those represent by field office designation. Our mission is to prevent, investigate, and solve crimes in collaboration with our criminal justice partners, and our vision is to deliver exceptional law enforcement services for a safer Minnesota with the values of integrity, excellence, ingenuity, and partnerships. I share that mission and vision for you because this combination of what we're doing continues to, work well with the mission and vision that we have set out for Minnesota and the services that we deliver. And this new team that we are forming together will fit right within that mission that has existed for a long time. I share this not as an eye test for all of you because I can't read it on my own screen. I share it because each one of the boxes on here represent a different program as you're looking, and we'd be happy to provide more detail on any of those. The reason I share it for a committee like this is I've heard some concerns that by doing this and putting it into the BCA, that we won't have the focus that we need on white-collar crime, insurance fraud, and those are legitimate concerns without necessarily understanding the importance of all of our programs. You don't hear about some of our laboratories every day, a toxicology laboratory, DNA laboratory, but I assure you they're foremost on my mind that they are functioning well, delivering the services that our partners expect across Minnesota, and this is an extremely important priority to us by forming this team and having the focus of what we're doing in the white-collar crime and financial crimes area. Our customers really is a broad spectrum of what we're looking at, 10,000 law enforcement, the judges, staff, everybody in this, public defenders, 87 county attorneys. And as we work on this, we will be adding other stakeholders such as the insurance industry, other people that work in some of the different areas and what we're doing with this new unit that I'll explain in a little bit. Our investigations division is broadly formed in this way. Our predatory crime section, we have a force investigations unit that is different in many, obviously in the respect of what they do, but similar in terms of they have a singular focus and scope as to what this new unit will do. They do force investigations across Minnesota, and that is really their primary and only focus in the work that they do. Our regional offices are comprised of homicide investigators, missing person cases, special investigations unit, which is large-scale drug trafficking cases, and task forces that we work with our federal partners, as I mentioned before. Our criminal information operations section is an information sharing hub that works on sharing information with our both state and federal and tribal partners across Minnesota and the United States. Financial crimes that I'll get into more detail, and then our violent crime reduction unit, which is our newest unit that we have formed in the last year, similar sized unit of 40+ people that is up operational, working to reduce violent crime across the state of Minnesota. Our financial crimes investigations involve unemployment insurance, Social Security disability determination. We have agents that the Social Security Administration pays for, and they do fraudulent work on behalf of the Social Security Administration with a Minnesota component, public assistance fraud, and we have contracted state agency fraud at the Department of Human Services, DEED, and the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency currently. We also work a broad variety of cases in our financial crime section currently today, such as identity theft, elder abuse, embezzlement, forgery, bank fraud, wire fraud, cryptocurrency, money laundering. I hope you saw from that there's some overlap in the work that we do, and that's part of why we bring these expertise together in this manner so that we can broadly work on those. In terms of the cases, this is a messy slide, and I recognize that, but we track all of the cases that we open in a given year. The one that is circled is fraud and forgery-related cases at the BCA, and as you can see here, already before this combination, it was in the top 5 of the number of cases that we opened within our investigations division last year. This slide is a little messy too, but we track the number of hours our agents work on any particular activity. And I'll note this particular one is force investigations, which is high because that's their singular focus and activity. The next closest for us was narcotics investigations. Then we looked at homicide investigations, and then the next one up is fraud in this category. So even if you look at it from the scope of hours worked on cases, it's still a significant component of what we do. Child sexual abuse material is a significant priority for us, and that, in terms of hours worked, even falls behind our fraud and forgery work in Minnesota. Here's some of the tips, and we track cases just slightly differently in terms of how we do these with our investigations, but it's analogous to referrals and cases open. As you can see, we go with this, and we have a significant rise in the number of tips coming into this unit in the last few years as well for financial crimes related work that you see here. This new unit, as is mentioned, I won't belabor some of the points, has been done through an executive order on January 3rd when Governor Walz established and ordered our 2 agencies to form this new unit as part of that executive order, and it will be combined into a new BCA financial crimes and fraud section within the investigations division at the BCA. And it's being done under the administrative reorganization order that will be effective on February 7th. As noted, we've experienced significant increases in fraud schemes related to government programs, and as a lot of people here know, and everybody that engages in this work, our fraudsters across Minnesota are not focusing on one particular program. They like to engage in a number of different frauds, and so bringing the talents of everybody together to focus on these individuals not only will hold them accountable, but hopefully pull resources and deconflict various cases, so hopefully we'll catch people much quicker in the process. As Commissioner Arnold and Commissioner Jacobson noted, this is not a victimless crime. It impacts children and others in need across our state, and in particular our tax dollars that are needed to go to the programs that you all appropriate to in that process, and not to criminals wishing to exploit the goodwill of Minnesotans. This coordinated approach will bring together, as I've noted, those expertise and all of the personnel to focus on a few different things along the way. One, and as Commissioner Arnold noted, insurance fraud will remain the priority of the individuals that are coming over. That's important to the state, and we are not losing focus of that. That team also does really excellent work when it comes to wage theft and some of the things that are seeing when employees or contractors are exploited by bad businesses across Minnesota, that we'll continue to do that work as well. And this team has been working together with the Department of Labor and Industry on misclassification crimes to formulate a scope and approach across Minnesota with that. And that work will continue as well. We'll do traditional financial crimes, as I've noted before, and both units continue to engage in. And then we'll also look at some of the other areas that we'll do in state program government fraud. I want to be clear, because we've been asked this question by several, that it's difficult when you look at how does this combination together create efficiencies in the process, and you're not just layering more onto a unit of people that are already busy. They are busy, they work very hard. And we'll ensure that we have common alignment and we eliminate redundancies and look for efficiencies. There will be some of those administrative processes that both agencies have to do now in terms of operating a law enforcement organization that will be centralized. And we will look at how best to organize along the way. In addition, you've also seen, as you saw in here, that we contract with several other state agencies. If we see a volume come up from one of the other state agencies that's significant, we will work together with that state agency to ensure that that state agency is funding resources under this common umbrella to work across that they would do that in that process. But we do have some of those resources now, and I will tell you that the Department of Human Services, in fact, yesterday, I signed a new contract with them that we had limitations on the types of cases that our agents could work, and we've expanded that to be available for all types of program fraud. And so we can look at this from an hours available to work across the entire new unit as opposed to individuals, and we'll have improved consistency, transparency, and efficiencies with this new unit. We have 150 plus agents or so across the state of Minnesota right now working on a broad variety of crimes. That is why we don't have any of these individuals coming over. They will stay focused on. We need their expertise pooled together to address this vexing problem, and these will be focused on criminal investigations. This is not an inspector general unit. This is not a civil or regulatory investigative unit with state agencies. They will take case referrals from the state agencies, from the public and others that might be exploiting our programs and do the criminal investigation. But they will work together with other state agencies to provide feedback, provide advice, to work together to prevent fraud from happening in our state programs moving forward once we're involved in a particular case. And we have broad law enforcement authority across the whole state. As I've noted, we work on a few different things along the way on the next slide in the combination, but we are working currently to gain a CALIA accreditation. We're about a year into that process. This brings best practices to all of the work that we do. Our laboratory has been accredited by an accrediting body, which ensures that we follow best practices, standardized procedures, and then we have audits of our programs to make sure we're adhering to those day in, day out. Our Minnesota State Patrol is in the same process right now. One of the things that we've been doing together is working to focus on the employees. We recognize this is a change for the employees that will be moving into this combined unit. It's a change for the employees at the BCA but it's a bigger change for the Commerce Fraud Bureau employees. We've been working with Minnesota Management Budget, Commerce Department, Minnesota Department of Public Safety together to make sure that this is a transition that keeps our employees centered in this process so that they can be the most effective that they can be and that they are supported through this process. The BCA has a very strong wellness program we've had in place with our sworn staff in particular. We contract with a program that focuses on employee wellness and health. They have a very difficult job. It focuses on their mental well-being. We have psychologists on contract that we work with every day. Our agents work with them on a regular basis. They have a fitness program, nutrition, financial health, et cetera. And we really want to make sure our perspective is always that the agents that come into our organization, they leave as healthy as possible on the back end when we hopefully get them to a healthy retirement. Case assignments, just to reiterate, will remain. The work they're doing today will continue, and we will work together with the leadership out of the Commerce Fraud Bureau to make sure that we identify it. Here is the last slide. I've hit on most of this before, but just to put it up and put a finer point on it, is we will continue to do the work that we've done. We look forward to the feedback from all of you. We're very comfortable with making sure that we have assurances in process as we talk to industry stakeholders, leaders, and policymakers like yourself. We recognize that, we saying that our particular focus will remain is one thing for us to say, but we intend to prove it to you in that process through reporting, through transparency, and any assurances that you need to make sure that we continue to focus on the important work that's been under the jurisdiction of this committee.
Thank you, Superintendent. I know that we have questions from the co-chair and other members. Before we go to those, are there any other members of the public who wish to testify on this matter? Going once, going twice. Questions from the committee? Senator Dames, Chair Dames.
Thank you, Chair Klein. And Commissioner Arnold, I think it was 2002 when the Commerce Fraud Bureau was being talked about for insurance fraud. And I know in that same era, there was an area where we were short of funds as far as budgetary purposes. And I think in 2004 is when the insurance companies agreed that they would come in and help finance part of this. And then in 2023, there was an expansion. And in 2024, the insurance companies came up again and said that they'd be willing to increase the funding in order to keep this going. My question is, the first question is, with the insurance companies putting in a lot of this money, which I consider to be private funds, and the other funds coming from the general fund, which would be public funds, what are we going to do to, well, first of all, did the insurance companies have an opportunity to weigh in on this change as far as this, putting these two together?
Commissioner Arnold.
Chair Klein and Chair Dames, thank you for the question. I think this process is part of the time that we're having conversations. I know that Superintendent Evans and Commissioner Jacobson have had a number of conversations with a variety of folks in the insurance industry.
Commissioner,
as well.
we're being asked to have you talk a little louder.
Sorry, I'm recovering from a cold, so I'll do my best. This is one opportunity. I've had a number of conversations with the folks in the insurance industry. I know Superintendent Evans has, I know that Commissioner Jacobson has, so we've had a number of conversations. And then I think you had a question about the funding.
Chair Dames.
Yes, so with the insurance companies putting this many dollars into this, what's going to be the guarantees that this money is going to go where it was originally talked about and originally designed to go? Not just for today or tomorrow, but for 10 years down the road, if we're still taking assessments on insurance companies, what's going to be there? Is there going to be some statutes done, or what is going to be in writing showing where this has to go and what the complications are and what would happen if it doesn't go there?
Leave that open for the commissioner or any of the other testifiers.
All right, Chair Dames, thank you for the question. So as Superintendent Evans mentioned, the money and the work will stay the same. I think it's probably worth for Superintendent Evans to talk a little bit through how he's thinking about transparency of both what comes in, but also, the work that is going on in the unit, because he's spent a lot of time thinking about how to show what, that the money that's coming in through the insurance assessment and through the other avenues is well spent and is spent according to the way that it is intended.
Superintendent Evans.
Chair Klein, Chair Dames, thank you for the question, and it's a very good question. And in terms of the funding itself, I think that's part of the reason we're having conversations with all of you, how to make sure that you feel comfortable that we will deliver on exactly the question that you have, not only for you, but for the insurance industry. The current statutory framework in the Commerce Fraud Bureau, in the interim, we plan to continue following exactly what that says and be sure that we are following the statute for the work of those individuals and employees. Moving forward, to your point, if there's something in writing, in statute, that we need to do to ensure that that funding is only dedicated to this unit and the work that they're doing and the important work of insurance fraud across Minnesota, we're very comfortable with. As Commissioner Arnold noted, in terms of reporting, there's a number of different ways we can do, and we'd be happy to share some templates that might make sense to all of you, that we can report on a cadence that makes sense for the work that we do. We track the work of all of our investigations very closely, and we want to provide the metrics not only for you, for the industry, for the stakeholders that rightfully have concerns about any change in a program that they find to be effective. We can do that in a variety of ways, but in terms of looking at cases that are referred and how we make that process as transparent as possible, it can be done in writing. The Commerce Fraud Bureau has a number of processes in place that they work to follow how they analyze cases, what they accept as case referrals, and we certainly can make that available to ensure that process continues and that we report out on what that process looks like. But we're very open to feedback on this to make sure that those assurances are in place in whatever form you as policymakers feel most appropriate, so that that money is going where it's intended to be.
Chair Dames.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Evans. Talking about keeping track of everything, in your presentation, you talked about how you kept track how many hours and how many things were closed and this and that. Will you be doing the same thing for all of the officers coming over on insurance fraud?
Superintendent Evans.
Chair Klein, Chair Dames, yes.
Thank you. And follow up, Mr. Chair.
Senator Dames. Chair Dames.
Commissioner Arnold, a question on the several states have the same system we have now, to where the Commerce Fraud Bureau or the insurance fraud is with the agency that handles the insurance issues. So there are two states that veered away from that I'm aware of. I think it was Louisiana and Virginia. And now Louisiana is going back to putting theirs back in with their division that handles insurance. Did you consult with them and see what the problems they saw were so that we don't run into those here?
Commissioner Arnold.
Chair Dames and Chair Klein. We are in the process of understanding for cases that are different, and I know Superintendent Evans has reached out in those cases to understand. I'll say Virginia's insurance department is significantly differently organized than ours here, and so I think some cases will be, they're like under a judicial body that's like not an appointed kind of thing. So I think that what I've learned in this role is that each state has its own unique features, and so we're certainly looking to learn. I think Minnesota is Minnesota, and so we'll want to make sure that we have solutions here that match the needs that we have here, and so Superintendent Evans, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Superintendent Evans.
Thank you, Chair Klein, Chair Dames. Assistant Commissioner Olson, that I'm sure you know from enforcement, has offered to reach out to the civil side of both of those organizations to look for just what you're asking, to make sure that we don't make any mistakes, that we understand how that works there. I'm currently the president of the Association of State Criminal Investigative Agencies. The BCAs of the United States is the way to think about this. I know the Virginia State Police folks very well, including Louisiana, and there's a couple others that have some pieces associated with this type of work as well across the United States. One of the other things that we just talked about yesterday on the BCA side is doing some surveys with all those members to identify areas that they do interact with the insurance bureaus from across the United States and those departments to look for those areas and to make sure that we are identifying any best practices or any of those pitfalls to make sure that we don't run into any of them with this change here in Minnesota.
Chair Dames.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Arnold, I understand that you serve on the National Association of Commissioners on the Consumer Affairs Committee and Anti-Fraud Task Force, and I understand that one of the current directors of the Commerce Fraud Bureau serves on a national committee on anti-fraud. Will you and this other gentleman, will they be eligible to continue to serve on these committees, or will they lose that committeeship?
Commissioner.
Chair Klein, Chair Dames, we're working through that right now. For the time being, Assistant Commissioner Olson, who oversees all of our enforcement, will be the named member of that committee. We have other cases, for example, on our health insurance side, we have share regulation with the Department of Health. We're the member of the NAIC as the insurance regulator, but we work with our Department of Health colleagues to make sure that in their role as health insurance regulators, they're able to participate as well. I would not expect any problems continuing to have, differently named agencies, but still doing the work, be participant in those committees because they're important to understanding the way that, fraud is working in other states and that making sure that we are doing our best to combat insurance fraud here in Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. I guess my question would go to Commissioner Arnold first, I guess. I'm trying to wrap my head around how does it work currently as far as how does the case right now get to the investigators? Does it come from the insurance companies? Does it come from your employees? Where does this come from? How does it get to the investigator?
Commissioner Arnold.
Chair Klein, Senator Howe. So right now, most of the referrals that we get are from insurance companies. They have their own units that are fraud prevention units. They're usually called SIUs. We get referrals from those units for cases. We open the cases. We have our own case management tracking system. As they transition over to the BCA, and Superintendent Evans can add on here, we fully expect that to stay the same. I mean, that's where, insurance companies are on the front line of seeing where there may be fraud in their day-to-day operations and are really well suited to being able to identify something that is beyond their scope as a company to be able to deal with. Then we take in the information that they have and they've gathered as part of their work and then, work through the criminal investigative process to see, if there are charges or anything like that. Superintendent Evans, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
Superintendent.
Thank you, Chair Klein, and Senator Hoffman. Thanks for the question. That process will continue to stay the same in terms of the referrals for Howe, I apologize, Senator Howe, I apologize. In the process will stay the same from there. The opportunity that we have, though, is this creates a one-stop shop for fraud in Minnesota. So as those cases come in on that side of the house and our side for financial crimes and fraud right now, we're handling them, in our own lanes from that. This comes into one place. We'll see if there's redundancy in terms of other cases that are already open. It will also help us aid in that review process to say, if we see this individual, even if it might not meet a normal threshold, but we're seeing them committing fraud in different areas, that this is an individual that we need to concentrate on.
Senator Howe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks. That kind of helps me understand that for most of the cases, there won't be much of a change to how it's reported. It's just they'll still, I'm hoping that the numbers will stay the same, the emails will stay the same for the most part. But the other question I have then, do you have a number, Commissioner Arnold, on the number of cases that are found by your employees and reported, or doesn't that happen? I mean, I did look up the statute, and I find it odd, and I'm having a bill drafted to change this, but I find it odd that right now, our state employees aren't required to report incidences of fraud in our contracts, in our grants. And I find that troubling for me, that when our state employees find that, and is that true that we don't get a lot of tips from our own state employees that maybe notice it first, or do you have a number that you could provide us that comes from our state employees that are working on the front line with this?
Commissioner Arnold.
Chair Klein and Senator Howe, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Evans in a minute to just talk through, I think, some of the beyond insurance fraud. The way that our team works, and we're working to, we'll maintain this connection. We have civil side investigations for insurance fraud. So if sometimes investigations that seem like a normal, claims dispute kind of thing can turn into oh, this seems fishy, we need to refer it over to our fraud unit. That can happen, and that we'll still be able to do that work. The work of the CFB is not, generally speaking, looking currently at state government fraud. So if we have, what they have done is to consult when we have programs. So they've done a great job of flagging some of the energy programs that we have, doing a little bit of consultation to say, hey, here's where you really want to look for something that might be fraudulent. If we did see something, then we would pull it into the appropriate channel, kind of depending on what that is. And Superintendent Evans, I think, can speak a little bit more to the broader state agency, because they have contracts with other agencies beyond commerce.
Superintendent.
Chair Klein and Senator Howe, state employees, the guidance is, from MAB that they are required to report fraud in state programs currently. However, we don't get a significant number of referrals into the work that we do directly from state employees in that process. And that's part of the process in growing this unit together, is that we will be developing resources. We've been talking through it right now. One, how to make sure the public knows where the work is and the work that's being done, and create that cross collaboration with the Commerce Department as well as this change occurs. But two, making sure that there's very easy one-stop shop resources as to how to report fraud in state government programs. We're currently working through what that looks like, and to make sure that we have the appropriate guardrails in terms of reporting, so that it's legitimate reports that are coming in. But that's one of the things that we're talking about right now, is to how to make that the tip button, the tip line, the information that can be shared, and then working together with our state agencies. We haven't talked about it a lot here, but in terms of state government program fraud, these are the areas that we are looking at with this new unit beyond the actual criminal investigation, as to how to provide that feedback loop back to state agencies, to make sure that there's points of contact for each of the state agencies, that employees' obligations are known to the individuals as they're doing their great work day in, day out, across the state, and then how to report that fraud from there. And this team will have contacts with each of the state agencies and those individuals responsible for rooting out fraud within any of the programs that are there. And so they'll have that ongoing discussion. And then, as Commissioner Arnold noted, really be there as a resource to the state agencies to provide feedback as they're starting new programs, along with some of the other people that do this work now in various auditing functions that we have across state government. But in addition, there is an MMB internal controls team that has individuals from across state government that meets to talk about how to improve internal controls within state agencies. And this team will be connected to that team. I've already had a conversation or connected with MMB team, and they are looking for additional ways that they can be a resource to this work as well.
Senator Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for that answer. You know, and I truly believe there's a lot of synergy that can be had by putting that together, but you also, in my past as an investigator, being located with the fire department was always an added to work on those arson investigations. And I think that my fear is, and I hope that that doesn't occur, but I think when you start pulling them all over into one, you lose that connection and you lose that synergy, because it's easy to stop in and talk to you and say, hey, you know, you might want to take a look at this because it looks a little funny. And that's why I was interested in how many tips come from employees, because that is usually the way you find it, is that somebody mentions somebody in the break room, in the coffee room, that says, hey, I'm going to just take a look at that. And that's how you step on it. And that's my concern, is when you physically pull these people out of that division, you're going to lose that synergy that was once there. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have a couple of questions for the superintendent, and really appreciate his work at the BCA and for being here today. You know, we had our most recent U.S. attorney here in Minnesota, Andy Luger, talk about how Minnesota has a fraud problem. And I was wondering, Mr. Chair, question for the superintendent is, you know, why do you think Minnesota has seen more than our fair share of public services fraud?
Superintendent Evans.
Chair Klein and Senator Rasmussen, thank you for the question. The U.S. Attorney Luger, prior to his departure, is a very close partner of the BCA, and we talk on a regular basis. This is one of the discussions that he and I had about what we need to do. And one of the things, and a number of the proposals that we've worked on that we're working together are results of being informed by some of those conversations that we've had with him, that we need to have a singular focus, that we have a unit that's dedicated to this work. Since that time, as this has been announced, I've been in contact with the FBI special agent in charge to discuss what this looks like and how we can build even stronger partnerships with them in that process. I think we've also had conversations, which you see them in some of the larger scale investigations at the United States Attorney's Office, the lead attorney, as to what they see. What they would say in the process is we need to ensure some of this work is done, it's formalized, and we have people regularly looking at our programs to make sure that we're flagging anomalies and large increases, decreases, whatever they may look like in the process in our state government programs, and that there's, as we call it in law enforcement investigations, investigative curiosity, that we look at those programs and we identify where something may not make sense. Sometimes it might be an error, sometimes it might be waste, but there's other times that it's fraud and criminal fraud that needs to be criminally investigated. And when we see that fraud, that we jump on that fraud as quickly as possible, and that's partly why we have a unit that we're forming together like this, so that we hold those individuals accountable quickly, and these are long-term investigations, I should say, as you know from this work. These cases are difficult. There's a lot of money structuring and various ways of hiding what they're doing. That's the whole scheme behind it, but that we hold those individuals accountable, whether it's at the state level or the federal level together, and to be able to exercise that across the board. That requires a culture across state government that we are looking to make sure that the funds that we are expending are being expended correctly across the board. I will note, on the front end of some of the larger scale pieces that you see, the COVID and the amount of money that was available and went out the door across the United States created a ripe opportunity for individuals that wish to exploit that system, and that this is a time that we need to really focus across state government to ensure that all people, not just the investigators, inspector generals, are looking for potential fraud and identifying it and reporting it up.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate the response. Superintendent, I'm glad to hear you're working with federal partners. Another question I had is, I understand, we'll be moving over these agents from the Department of Commerce over to the BCA. Are there any net new agents that are being added as a part of this unit? And if there are, how many?
Superintendent Evans.
Thank you, Chair Klein and Senator Rasmussen, for the question. The unit together right now will combine into a unit of approximately 42 FTEs together. The only new ask this cycle out of the governor's recommended budget would be one forensic accountant to aid this team in their work, and then two contracted attorneys generals. The purpose of those two attorneys would be to provide advice to the team, provide advice to state agencies, both if a case gets declined for prosecution or is prosecuted, to help us formulate response and recommendations back to the state agencies, how to prevent that fraud from occurring into the future, and then be available to our rural prosecutors across Minnesota. These white-collar crime fraud cases are very intensive in terms of the personnel hours that are involved to prosecute them. Sometimes they're racketeering cases, very complex, and so they'd be available to provide prosecutorial assistance as needed if the right venue is in a rural county, for example, for one of these schemes. So that would be the ask from there. And then we'll always look for, efficiencies in the process. And if additional personnel can be hired to put additional staffing on this particular problem, that is where any efficiencies that can be gained will go to combat fraud across the spectrum of what we've seen.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Superintendent Evans. And I guess, my concern with this is that it's basically a press release. And what I mean by that is we're doing some reshuffling of the chairs, and we get to say we care more about fraud than we have for the last 6 years from the administration. But we're hiring one new FTE. Doesn't sound like we're adding any new agents. When I had a hearing yesterday in the Committee on Human Services, the Office of Inspector General is vacant. They didn't even have anyone from the Office of Inspector General within DHS to come testify. And we had the OLA come and talk about the issues that they continued on surface. And one of the key issues that they identified was there's a lot of rules and requirements, both within agency policy and in Minnesota law. And one of the key problems is that the agencies just aren't doing it. DHS isn't doing the site visits that are required. They're not making sure that the paperwork is filled out correctly. I had an instance in one of the communities that I represent where you had an individual who was billing the state for feeding 2,000 kids a day in a community with 2,500 people. You could have just done a Google search and understood that that wasn't taking place. They didn't even have a lease, didn't even have a location. And so one of the things I worry about is that this might be a nice press release. Our governor gets to go say, rah, rah, we care about fraud. But at the end of the day, are we actually putting more resources into holding agencies accountable and to going after fraudsters? And I guess that's my prime concern. I think we all care about fraud. I certainly do. I'm tired of seeing tax dollars going to where they're not supposed to go. But I just am not convinced that this is more than just something that was nice to say in response to negative media versus actually trying to address the issue.
That was not a question. Do you have a response, Superintendent?
Senator Klein and Senator Rasmussen, I think we all share, certainly at this table, the significant concern about fraud across the state of Minnesota. We're confident that this team coming together has the capacity to have an additional focus on state program fraud from a criminal perspective when it's referred. I think the underlying point of your statement is that that needs to start within the state agencies to be identifying the fraud. And I want to be clear through this process, this team is not designed to have additional controls and insight into the state agencies in terms of that day-to-day and the pieces that you're referencing. This team is designed to handle criminal referrals of fraud in Minnesota, and so there's certainly additional components that can be handled within the state agency. And to your point about, within following guidance and process and procedure, we want to be a resource to provide feedback and information and guidance to those state agencies, but those state agencies are going to need to be the ones to work through their programs to identify that fraud. And there's a number of good things, as you probably heard, that are going. You've passed a number of new laws in the last year that provided additional guidance. There's some that, a number of different policy proposals, and in the governor's budget, we're here talking about this, but there are a number of different components to that for additional staffing to do those follow-up visits and the things that you referenced in the other state agencies, and that's a different component that isn't part of this, but we agree is critically important to prevent this fraud from occurring in the first place, along with some other components of stop payment, being able to do that more quickly across state government. We would agree that all of those are important components to stop the fraud in Minnesota.
Members, we have more questions. I just want to remind the committee that we are all very concerned about fraud within state agencies, but the purpose of this hearing is to discuss the transfer of the Commerce Fraud Bureau over to the the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll put my questions out there, and they're going to be a little bit all over the board. This is a new committee for me, and I have some questions that came up. One is the CFB has pretty broad subpoena authority, and in the insurance area, as I understand it. And when you transfer these employees over, is that broad subpoena authority going to be transferred as well to the BCA?
Superintendent.
Thank you, Chair Klein and Senator Green. That authority vests within the commissioner and is a delegated authority to the individuals doing that work. That doesn't transfer in that process. We're in conversations with that team and the transition team to ensure that they have the tools available to them to be able to do their job. I will note that, we at the BCA, we work with the Attorney General's office to issue the majority of our subpoenas for our criminal work. It's not unique to that work. That authority is unique. But we literally issue thousands and thousands of subpoenas a year that's related to our criminal casework. But it's an item that we're working through the most appropriate and legal way through this process, but we will ensure they have the tools they need to do their job.
Senator Green.
Yep. And thank you for that, but it sounded like the answer was no. The other issues, you brought up the Attorney General, and one of the questions that I had, and it may be a simple answer, but when the Commerce Department has a case and they turn it over for prosecution, who does it go to? Does it go to the Attorney General? Does it go to local attorneys, county attorneys?
Superintendent or Commissioner.
Chair Klein and Senator Green. So it varies. It depends on the jurisdiction. It depends on who we've been working with. In some cases, we work with federal. We work with the FBI and others. In some cases, we're working with much more local jurisdiction. So it really depends on the case, how it originated, what the facts are, and who we've been working with. I know that that's also similar to the work that BCA does. So, it's, I would say, analogous in that the investigation happens within the investigative unit, whether that's BCA or the CFB. And then the prosecution is a collaborative effort with county attorneys, with the FBI, with the U.S. attorney. It depends on the scope. It depends on the facts. And so that's similar between the two. So it won't really change from that perspective.
Senator Green.
Okay, thank you for that. I too am having a little trouble hearing, and I don't know if it's you or me, but I think you answered my next question, which was with the BCA, is that the same process? Okay. The other question that I had, Mr. Chair, the other question that I have is with the data that's collected. As I understand it, Commerce Department has pretty narrow database within the insurance industry, where the BCA has a pretty broad database. And my fear, and it's been brought to me, is that some of this data might be out there where it shouldn't be as far as information on whether it be insurance companies or folks as well. And the current concern that I heard actually came about after this deal with the post board releasing some information that shouldn't. The bigger the organization, it seems like the more opportunity there is for stuff to leak out. So is there enough safeguards within that industry to protect that data?
Superintendent.
Chair Klein, Senator Green, it's an excellent question. The BCA has some of the highest security standards when it comes to data protection. We manage literally millions of criminal history records from across the state. 16 million is in the current database there. We have 30-plus forward-facing databases that Minnesota law enforcement uses. We work through all of these from a legal perspective, and any data that this team needs to be able to complete their jobs, it will have the appropriate protections in place with that. In terms of when you mentioned, the post board, any agency has a potential for, a problem with data. But we have significant safeguards in place for all of the data that we house, and criminal justice data in particular has some of the most stringent security requirements. That, for example, is why the BCA, is outside in some respects of the entire Minute enterprise system, so that we have additional safeguards in place for our data to ensure that it doesn't go anywhere that it shouldn't go.
Senator Green.
Mr. Chair, just one more question, and it's kind of a more simplified version of what Senator Rasmussen asked. It seems like not much is going to change. And so that would kind of give us the indication that somewhere along the line, somebody thought that the CFB wasn't doing a really good enough job. I don't know if that's true or not, but the question is, why do this? If everything's going to be the same and the agencies were working well, what's the point?
I'll leave that open to any of the commissioner.
Chair Klein and Senator Green, I think that I would maybe take the opposite interpretation of the CFB is not doing a good job. I think because they do a great job, they've been asked to be part of this larger organization to lend their expertise to a set of, to continue to work on the cases that they currently work on, and then, as Senator Howe mentioned, have the coffee room conversation with their colleague who currently is working on different kinds of financial crimes at the BCA to say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you done this? We're seeing this. We have this individual, really to be able to be a force multiplier. And I think that because the CFB does such great work, that's why they've been looked to be a part of this. Superintendent Evans or Commissioner Jacobson, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Commissioner.
Chair Klein, Senator Green, that is a great question that you point out. But number one, as I mentioned before, as we were coming in, fraud has certainly been an issue that we've been hearing about, we've been reading about. Legislators are concerned. We've heard from the governor that this is a concern. We're hearing from our constituents and your constituents that are out there. We know that fraud is a concern and an issue. We have been tasked not only by the governor to take this role on with significant amount of scrutiny, a significant amount of work that we're trying to do with our stakeholders and partners across the state of Minnesota to make sure that we do it. People are going to be watching us as we try to put this unit together, and we're going to continue to provide answers, continue to provide results, and show you the work that we can do. As we bring together two really great units who have a lot of expertise when it comes to fraud investigations, pooling those resources, pooling those ideas, helping that team build themselves a team together to build some real momentum across the state of Minnesota with a mandate. There's a mandate that we are hearing from the governor, the mandate we're hearing from the public. We see that people are not getting the funds that they should, and people who shouldn't be getting funds are. We see it as a duty and a role and an honor to be able to attack this and to make sure that we're going after those people in the state of Minnesota that are abusing the system. It's as simple as that. Now, we may not have more people here, but we are going to energize that group. They are going to work together. They're going to help us decide the best and most appropriate ways to go after fraud. We're going to sing about this across the state of Minnesota so our employees, those that are around the state of Minnesota, know that what we're doing, and to call us, to report to us, to make sure that we are in the loop once things don't look right. And I think we can bring some real energy, some real expertise, and some real results to you and the state of Minnesota on fraud. And guess what, if we don't, Senator Green, you're going to be calling me and say, what the heck are you doing, Commissioner? And you should. And all of you should as we work through this process. We will be transparent, we will be open, we will be sharing information. Superintendent Evans, again, as he'd mentioned, he's nationally recognized for the work that he does at the BCA in the state of Minnesota. We're lucky to have him leading it. We're lucky to have these two teams that want to come together to serve the state of Minnesota on this topic. And we're bringing them together for their expertise, the energy that they can bring, the competence that they can bring. And we are going to deliver, because Senator Green or Senator Rasmussen or any of you that call me, I want to be able to tell you 2 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, here's what we're doing, and I'll show you the data, and we're going to perform for the state of Minnesota.
Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. Senator Green asks me what the heck I'm doing all the time, so. And I think you should assume you have that kind of a mandate 24/7, 365. I think that goes without saying. I have a handful of questions. Some of them have already been touched on. And I want to start off by saying I appreciate the work that all of you do. I appreciate the work of the BCA, the CFB, DPS, a lot of good people out there doing a lot of good work on behalf of the state of Minnesota. So my questions aren't meant to be critical by any means, but they are bringing a healthy dose of maybe skepticism and just trying to identify what it is we're doing. And I think, Commissioner, a lot of people would I'll speak for myself, I'd be a lot more confident in the statement you just made if we hadn't had several incidences dating all the way back over the course of 5 or 6 years. And that's not aimed at you personally, but that's why you're sensing some frustration up here and across the state of Minnesota when it comes to taxpayers and their dollars. I want nothing more than for all of you to succeed with this plan, but I've got some questions about it. The first one is this plan that's been outlined here today the extent of what the governor's plan is to address fraud, or is there more?
Superintendent.
Chair Klein and Senator Duckworth, I think you saw it as part of the announcement and will be continued to be part of his, the governor's budget recommendations. There's a number of different components. You know, the other state agencies would need to speak to some of those components specifically. But you saw in that process that there were a number of different recommendations in that. There's some policy language that's specific to programs and stop payment and looking across the enterprise in that process from there. There's also policy language regarding increased penalties that have been noted, but that also would examine as a policy proposal that'll be heard or will be examined by other committees if deemed appropriate, and creating a new statutory framework for theft of government funds. That it's standalone. We have good theft statutes in place right now, but it's complicated. And so this pulls it out to make it really easy in this particular realm to take an examination and a look at that as well. You also heard announced a recommendation from the governor's budget recommendation for a pilot for an AI tool to look across state government enterprise and the various payment systems that are out there to identify. The concept from Commissioner Tomes, as you know, note is, you know, you or I get that notification on our phone that this is an anomaly with the spending we have, and that would be the same framework from there. And I've had a couple people have caught me in the hallway over here talking about how they've done that as companies and would love to talk to the people as they look at that. And so there's a broad variety of tools and recommendations that the governor has made for this session to be examined on how to prevent fraud and uncover it more quickly. This is just one component of that, and that is to make sure that those that are committing criminal fraud are examined and held accountable in that process criminally for their actions.
Senator Duckworth.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Duckworth.
Thank you. Is the entire CFB moving over to the BCA or just a portion? Could you elaborate on that, please?
Superintendent or Commissioner.
Neither of us, the whole thing is,
Senator Duckworth.
all individuals are moving.
All right, so I have a follow-up on that, if that's all right. So the CFB, the Commerce Department in general, one of your main duties obviously is holding a lot of licenses of various professions. Realtors, mortgage originators, brokers, you name it. And oftentimes if there are issues with some of those peoples, or if there's some enforcement that's required as it relates to their license that the Commerce Department holds, typically they're having to deal with the CFB. Are they now going to have to handle or deal with the BCA in terms of any administrative actions or issues that come about those professionals as it relates to their license?
Commissioner.
Senator, Chair Klein and Senator Duckworth. So right now, they don't necessarily come through the CFB if they've had, if they're part of a criminal, let's say they happen to have a real estate license and they also are part of an insurance fraud scheme, then they would maybe come through the CFB. We have an entire enforcement unit that deals with various issues that come up with all of our licensed entities. So that can be anything from, we just announced a few multi-state actions against a variety of kinds of companies, but that happened largely through our securities area. We have, as an ongoing course of our business, we can take actions, either administrative or refer for criminal if there are any, anything that we would see there against licensees. But we have an entire enforcement unit that does a lot of great work, and they will continue to do that great work.
Senator Duckworth?
Thank you. So that enforcement unit is separate from the individuals we're talking about?
Correct.
Commissioner. Yeah.
Thank
Senator Duckworth.
Has this been a proposal that's been out there before, or why is this just now coming about? Have we had conversations about these two things or these folks merging together in the past, and we're just now getting around to it, or is this an immediate response to what we've seen in terms of some of the high dollar fraud?
Commissioner.
Chair Klein and Senator Duckworth, I think this is a concept that's been around for at least since my time in this role in various ways. I mean, there are many people have many opinions about the way that the department is organized, and this is one of the many different ways that folks have had ideas about what I think has changed. I think Superintendent Evans can speak to this, is that, there is a real and emergent and urgent problem to be solved, and so this team is being asked to come together with the BCA, the folks at the BCA who do the work, to be able to tackle what's a real challenge.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Duckworth.
So when we, specific to the CFB folks, and I'm looking at some of the lists of incidences of fraud that we've experienced more recently, Feeding Our Future, 250 million, Child Care Assistance Program, 100 million, frontline worker bonus pay, about 50 million, Medicaid, unemployment benefits, SNAP. Were any of these under the purview of, or did the CFB work on any of these instances of fraud?
Commissioner.
Chair Klein, Senator Duckworth, no.
Okay, if I may, Mr. Chair. That's one of the concerns I have as it relates to this. It was something that's been said often throughout the hearing today is we're gonna move these folks, add a person, but what they're focused on is going to be the same, or they're gonna keep focusing on what it is they're focusing on, mainly insurance fraud. And all the big ticket items I just listed that add up to about $500 million in fraud are things that these folks weren't even investigating or a part of to begin with. So I think that's part of the disconnect here when you hear folks say, what are we really fixing? How is this actually gonna change things? And it's meant to be constructive skepticism. It's not simply meant to be negative. But I do share that concern. We're moving some people from one building to another, and now all of a sudden, they're gonna start uncovering massive fraud schemes that have been missed over the last 5 or 6 years. So I really need a lot of help connecting those dots to say to my constituents and the people of Minnesota, because we moved the CFB over to the BCA, you don't have to worry about the massive fraud that's been occurring in Minnesota over the last few years.
Commissioner or Superintendent.
Chair Klein and Senator Duckworth, I understand your skepticism, and I think it's fair skepticism to have. I want to be really clear about one thing, though. This is not moving the CFB over to the BCA. This is combining the CFB and the financial crimes team that we have at the BCA that does a wide variety of cases, some of which you've mentioned there, together to pool those expertise, gain efficiencies, gain resources that are pooled, and the expertise that we have together to look at some of these. Those are large-scale dollar amount frauds that you've noted, but there aren't a large number of cases that are component of those cases that you mentioned. What we need to do is work together so that those large frauds don't occur anymore and that we hold people accountable. We also will work with our federal partners, pooling those resources together. You gain efficiencies by making a move like this. You don't have to maintain 2 different fleets. You don't have 2 different use of force programs. You're co-located together working on one process together. You have people that work on your policies and procedures that are centralized in our legal team and a team that does all of that together. And that's how you gain this, so that we have the individuals that have the expertise in fraud focused on that fraud continuously and working with our federal partners along the way. Feeding our fraud is a big problem, and as you noted and has been noted with the United States Attorney has taken on that case in that process, but there was significant federal component to that particular investigation as well. And so this team will work together with them in that process. It is not just moving over to just do the same. Their focus will remain the same in terms of the amount of work that they need to do on the various important topics, but we're also moving our team in together, and across the board in the spectrum is where you gain some of those efficiencies and then able to learn from each other to be the best unit that they can be together going forward. But to your question and point is that we need to prove that to you, and that's why we said we will work through that process to be transparent, to tell you what we're doing, how we're doing it, to make sure we don't lose the focus and that you can see where that increased capacity can come from.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Senator
I'm almost
Duckworth.
done. I get the idea of centralizing things, and I think that was pretty, I mean, that was a word that was highlighted over and over again when this came out. We are creating a new centralized fraud unit. I give you the centralized, new, I don't know, it's a lot of the same people, but that's okay. Maybe some feedback for you is, are we centralizing with the right people or all of the people that are necessary to be centralized? Are there folks from some of these departments and agencies that you might consider partnering with, or I know you've talked about having dialogue with them and things of that nature, but that would be something that I would add as well. And last but not least, Mr. Chair, what I would recommend that the chairs do, being chairs of the Commerce Department and us being part of the legislative branch, is to look at what role the legislature should be playing in terms of attacking fraud here in the state of Minnesota. Appreciate these folks who do phenomenal work. They represent a lot of great people out there that work on behalf of Minnesota, but ultimately they answer to the executive branch and to the governor, which is fine. But I think part of the checks and balances necessitates that the legislature assert itself and also be a part of providing oversight to help prevent fraud and make sure that a lot of the departments and agencies and the budget that we're passing is really reined in and is executed as it should be and responsibly. So I hope these questions display to you all that we desire to partner with you, but I don't expect just the governor to be the one to fix this problem. I think we play a role in it as well, and I think we should look at passing some laws that help them. That's all I've got, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, and I think you will see abundant legislation coming forward from both parties this year to address fraud. I'm not sure it will be in the domain of the Commerce Committee, but it will be present. We have only one remaining questioner, I believe. Senator Dames.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And earlier in the discussion today, you talked about how bringing these groups together and that they were, I got the feeling you wanted to say they were excited to get together. Commissioner Arnold, is that true about the group of the current Fraud Bureau? Were they excited about this?
Commissioner Arnold.
Senator Klein, or Chair Klein, Chair Dames, I think everyone who gets their work acknowledged in a way that puts it on a bigger stage is perhaps a little bit nervous about what that might mean, and sometimes there's nervousness about change. But I think in general, the officers who are in that unit are really excited about the opportunities, excited about to be called on, and excited to be a part of a new agency or a new unit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair Dames.
And another question. You have you mentioned, Mr. Supervisor Evans, Superintendent Evans, I'll get that right, I apologize. You mentioned that you have 13 different locations throughout the state. Will some of these people be put into those locations, or will they all be centrally housed in the Twin Cities here?
Superintendent.
Thank you, Chair Klein and Chair Dames, for the question. The unit that's moving over will be centrally located at our headquarters location now, but it provides us an opportunity over time as retirements occur. If there are other areas of the state that would make more sense, if there's fraud, to have somebody located. You saw in our values as a BCA, one of those is partnerships. And, you know, some of the questions that have been had here today are real as to how to continue that partnership with the Department of Commerce and the various industries. And we ensure that our agents continuously are working on those relationships and partnerships to be able to be the most effective we can. And so over time, if it makes sense across the state, but if it doesn't make sense, they'll stay at headquarters. Our largest staffing pool for all of our work is at the BCA. We have over 500 employees that are centrally located at our headquarters location, and the team that's moving over will move there, and they will not move anywhere else unless they requested to, and then we'd evaluate it at that time.
Thank you.
Chair Dames. Senator Latz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you may have already answered this question earlier before I was able to join us here today, but I'll ask the question anyway. I would assume there's some sort of a feedback loop between fraud investigators and agency personnel to identify better ways to detect signs of fraud anyway before it gets turned over to an investigator, and best practices for that purpose. Could you perhaps elaborate on that?
Superintendent.
Chair Klein, Senator Latz, thank you for the question. You know, I think Commissioner Arnold alluded to this before, that the CFB already does a really great job with this internally within their agency in preventing, and as they set up new programs, providing advice how to prevent fraud. We have that feedback loop that you referenced with some of the agencies that we contract with currently. Part of what the approach of this team will be is how to institutionalize that across all the state agencies when we encounter these cases. And that's part of this consolidation, is that feedback loop that we have with some agencies right now that we do their work on today, that we make sure that we're doing that moving forward. As I noted as well, as part of the budget, the governor's budget recommendation for 2 attorney generals that we would contract with to be assigned to this team, that's part of the work in addition to the prosecutorial assistance that we envision them doing, really digging in and providing that feedback back for us to really outline how to improve the programmatic guidance, the internal pieces that they need to look at, so that we can provide that back in a formal way so that agency leadership can take that in and make appropriate changes as necessary within their organization.
Senator Latz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Superintendent, is there any sense that of whether or not resources are sufficient within the agencies to get enough eyeballs on reports that are coming in? You know, if a report just comes in electronically and it gets filed away electronically and someone doesn't take the time to look at it, they wouldn't necessarily notice that there were 2,500 free meals being given out in a town of 2,500 people, for example. Is there a resource element to this as well, or is it more a matter of practices?
Superintendent.
Chair Klein, Senator Latz, I'd certainly want to defer to the agencies that are specific and different resources across the state government enterprise. But I will note, just back to part of the governor's budget recommendation, is additional personnel that are related to this to do just as you note, to make sure that the appropriate site visits are occurring in some of the different agencies, different personnel that the agencies have identified for that purpose, to ensure they have the right resources to identify that. And that AI tool that I noted, to be able to really look across those payment systems and identify anomalies is one of those areas that they're trying to be smart about how we approach this too, so that it's sometimes individuals that need to do, you know, individualized visits or examination, but also how do we utilize technology to identify this more quickly in the process. So to be succinct, it is a resource issue, and it's make sure that we're aligning all the resources appropriately to look at this problem.
Senator Latz.
And Mr. Chair, finally, I guess more a comment than a question, but there's the False Claims Act in Minnesota, which I carried a long time ago, which is a counterpart to the Federal False Claims Act, and which would incentivize people in the field who are in the agencies where some people might be submitting false claims to reimbursement to recognize it, identify it, and report it. There's a financial incentive for them to do so, and it probably wouldn't hurt to make sure employees in all of those organizations that are receiving public funds to know that they have that opportunity. If they see something, they should say something. Thank you.
Senator Latz. I think that's the end of the committee questions. Commissioners and Superintendent, thank you so much for coming today and enlightening us on this. Thank you to the committee. The questions were excellent, and I learned a lot. Before we wrap up, we have one new member who arrived midstream. Senator Matthews, if you could introduce yourself briefly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was presenting a bill across the street, so apologies for being late. But Senator Andrew Matthews from District 27. I live in Princeton. I represent Princeton, Zimmerman, Big Lake, Becker, Clear Lake, and St. Francis, and some of the rural communities surrounding that. So appreciate my time to join this committee. First time on commerce in my time in the legislature, and excited to be learning with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Matthews. We're privileged to have your wisdom at the table. Members, we will not meet on Tuesday. Our next meeting will be January 30th. The committee is adjourned.